All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. We are here with another amazing session I am so excited about. This is the art of distribution, marketing, and producing. And we have three amazing artists in their own right in the world of marketing, distribution, and producing. Our good friends that you've seen at a few of these conferences. Matthew Stein is with us today, M.E.S. Productions. He's the gentleman that, as you know, I've worked with everything from Live Nation to Sony International to Dimension Films, as well as his longtime friend and colleague and a new MMFM speaker we're welcoming today, Francois Martin, who is with Vertical Entertainment, but has also worked with the Weinstein Company to help distribute and sell some of the biggest films of all time, including The King's Speech, none other than executive producer Paul Brett, who is also with us on this amazing all-star panel that we are so excited to bring you today. From the UK to Los Angeles to Florida and everywhere in between, we are bringing you the best and brightest of the industry from all over the world. Of course, speaking of the world, we want to thank our host, Kamakol. We want to thank all our amazing sponsors, including Stage 10, which is bringing you this live broadcast today. So we're excited. So I say, let's just jump into it. I want to bring in our first guest. I want to start with our new colleague, Francois, and just chat with him a little bit before bringing on the full panel. Francois, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you, Jose Luis. Great to be with everyone. Just a quick background on myself. I started my career at Miramax Films as a marketing assistant and transitioned into the Weinstein Company when the founders left Miramax, and ended up working my way through the marketing department and all the way up to president of marketing strategy. As JL mentioned, got a chance to one of the career highlights is working on Paul's film, The King's Speech, which not only did over $100 million at the box office, but also won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. One of the few films that sort of had that critical and commercial success in a really long time. After the Weinstein Company, went to a company called Aviron Pictures, was there for a few years as a marketing strategy and content sales executive. And Forest Road, which is a financial firm some of the filmmakers may have heard of, was in the process of buying Vertical Entertainment. They also bought Aviron Pictures, merged the two together, and I've been with Vertical ever since, specifically focusing on monetizing the Vertical library and their content.
Oh, wow. Well, that's interesting. And, we see how quickly this world just kind of changes, right? And how things are constantly evolving. But it's great to hear that you have this amazing background with Paul Brett as well. So we're going to bring you right back into the group chat as soon as we say hi to our good friend Paul and get his take on things. Paul Brett, how are you?
Thank you so much, JL, and thank you for those kind words, Francois. Very happy days thinking of that 10 years ago and celebrating the premiere at Toronto this very month. And so it's a long time. And only on Friday I had breakfast with the legend that is Stuart Ford, who now runs AGC Studios and was IM Global, and also did his time in the trenches at Miramax and so forth. And we actually had breakfast at the Ham Yard Hotel right here in Soho in London, adjacent to the Miramax offices, which was great fun. It's also very nice to see you, Matt, and I only wish I could be with you all, and indeed our audience, at the Biltmore in Coral Gables. But soon come, it will be. And I thank you for hosting this, and thank you to Kamakol for providing this stage for us to have a chat.
Absolutely. I think this year more than ever, we realize the world is a stage, right? And we are here. So I would like now to bring in our third panelist, and then we'll go to the group discussion. Our very good friend and longtime MMFMer, Mr. Matt Stein. How are you, Matt?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me once again here at MMFM. It's great to see you, JL, and great to be with Francois and Paul, my esteemed fellow panelists. It's great to be back.
So tell us a little bit more. Matt, you've been doing a lot of different work, and you're out in LA. Just kind of paint the picture for how things are looking right now in Los Angeles, and sort of what I guess is referred to as the kitchen of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. A quick update on sort of what's going on with me. I think when last we talked on this panel, I was running film and television, scripted film and television at Live Nation. Obviously, some things changed as a result of the global pandemic, especially with a live events company that primarily does live events and ticketing. So there were some changes like after 2 years. And, rather than putting a robust, amount of money into doing scripted, they decided to just mainly focus on unscripted. And, I transitioned back into a producing role at the company. And now I basically am producing a movie for them on their one scripted project that they're working on. And I've transitioned into a producing role with the Warner Music Group, where I'm doing a bunch of film and television projects with them as well.
Very cool. A lot going on. And I want to take this opportunity right now just to kind of bring the whole group in there. And we can get started on our discussion on our topics for today. Paul, what are your thoughts on sort of the latest distribution and marketing trends, and where do you see the industry going from here?
Let's start with the easy one, shall we?
Yes, I always do that.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Because it's just changing on a daily basis. I was talking to, as I mentioned in the introduction, having this conversation with Stuart Ford, and he was just saying that all his colleagues at the major studios, which the last time we were all physically together, the majors ran the show. Universal, Paramount, Fox, Disney, Warner Brothers, Sony, and it's in that time, Fox has disappeared, and now it's all about the streamers. And we were just discussing at the Emmys on Sunday night. That a total shutout for all the TV channels, and
Right.
Only 10 years ago they would have, HBO, nothing, and it's now Apple and Netflix. So that's on one side of it, and I know that this is the Miami media and film market, so it's about film and television and streaming, and it's that pitch. When I've just spent a few minutes chatting to colleagues of yours based in Miami who are pitching projects, looking to get things done. And now I would say 80% of pitches are aimed at the small screen. And those rarities where people are saying they want a theatrical release, you just realize that what was once a minuscule chance has gone to an infinitesimal chance, because everything is based on the smaller screen, which has always been where the revenue is. Even going back to the King's Speech, as Francois would testify, $137 million at the box office, but the real revenues come from the home entertainment, for years to come, from the video, from the television, and so forth. And the share that the producer receives at the theatrical box office, who knows now? Because that's one of the ways that Bitcoin is going to come in, where we're tracking revenues electronically. But I still think the aspiration's there. As I was mentioning in our introductions, I still try and get to the cinema as often as possible. I look forward to seeing it on the big screen, and I hope it isn't just going to be the preserve of Marvel movies, but we will have the chance to see our own smaller projects on the big screen in societies, at festivals, and with specialized cinemas.
Right. No, great point, and a great segue back over to Francois. And obviously, Vertical dealing with so many of these great stories, great independent films, including a couple of Miami stories that came out recently, like Critical Thinking, the Leguizamo picture, Rifa, which was to have its world premiere at the Miami Film Festival last year, which unfortunately didn't happen. That festival actually got shut down halfway through. So paint us a picture of an independent filmmaker that maybe has a film that's looking to start a festival run, or maybe what folks are going through now in terms of distribution strategy for some of these smaller films that Brett was talking about?
Well, look, I think from a marketing perspective, the festivals are key for two main things. From my history at the Weinstein Company, one is you'll have the festivals that sort of anoint the picture, and will give it sort of a halo effect where it starts at Telluride, it goes to Toronto, with or without a distributor. Sometimes the King's Speech, as Paul mentioned, we already had that when it premiered at Toronto. But then if you look at a movie like an I, Tonya, that was picked up at Toronto. So those and then it makes its run through the fall, into a theatrical release in December, January, having those critical reviews already, and when it comes out, people are already aware of it. And if you're an independent filmmaker and you send your film to one of those festivals, they'll tell you pretty much whether you're going to be in or not. So if that's not a route you're able to take, I think another great one after Sundance is really more of a film buyer's market. After Sundance, you have South by Southwest, you have Tribeca. All these can create a buzz for you, and through whether you have a distributor or not, through social media, I think has been so key in spreading the word on a sort of word of mouth basis that we didn't have before. So once that buzz is created from those festivals, it can either launch yourself into theaters, or it can get you a distributor. So I still believe in festivals, and I still believe that they're a key component to independent marketing distribution, because look, word of mouth for these little pieces of art is a huge thing, and it's something that you can't buy with media. And when you're in the independent film game, your marketing dollar can be very thin. So if you can get 100 people at Sundance to say they like the film, then they tell 200 people, and then you're going into South by Southwest, then you're going in Tribeca. It really creates this group that can evangelize your picture and take it through, whether you want a distributor or whether you're going to release in theaters.
Right. No, that's a great point about the PR aspects. And just to kind of close this little circle, back at the 2010 Toronto Film Festival, I was actually invited to the King's Speech press junket by a local reporter named Maria Salas. And I got to kind of see that work in process. And just to see her, especially talking to Colin and saying, "You're going to win an Oscar. You're going to win an Oscar." Like, she was relentless about it. I almost felt like, gosh, it's almost like someone told her to do that. But, you feel that energy, and that happens at a festival, right? I think you can't really replicate that in a virtual scenario.
It's so funny you mention that, because I remember I wasn't at Telluride when King's Speech went there. But our lawyer was, our LA-based lawyer, and she phoned me on a Saturday night. She'd just come out of a screening at 2 p.m, and being somewhat prescient, I listed the 12 nominations it was going to get. I was one out, but I listed them all then, and it was just knowing that feeling at a festival and being at the press and industry. How we all love the P&I screenings at Toronto. That press screening, 9:30 on a Saturday morning, the best slot in that main hall in the Scotiabank Theatre, and just feeling that buzz that people knew this was the one, that it was going to go on and win the People's Choice Award. Nothing beats it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's amazing. So now that we're talking about that, Matt, talk a little bit about, as a producer now, and kind of planning the next thing, understanding how this industry has sort of functioned and how that PR machine and that marketing is so important. But kind of like, as you're planning the next productions now from the LA side of things, what are producers and studios looking at as sort of, where do we go from here? Oh, I don't think we have audio on Matt. So we may have to reset him because we cannot hear Matt. I can see him very well. But let's see if you may. Yeah, that would be great if you don't mind.
While Matt is fixing up, we're in the process of doing a deal at the moment on a film that is in its 5th week of prep. It's starting on October the 25th. It's going to shoot in Spain and Ireland, and I've just had a message up on a screen because LA is waking up and they're wanting to know about the transfer of funds and everything that's going across. And while negotiating, so little attention is being paid. It's a big star. It's a big $25 million movie. And yet everybody's talking about the streaming. And this is all down to one woman, and that is Scarlett Johansson and what she did with Black Widow, and talking about, the fact that Disney diminished her, the fact that she would have earned $50 million on a traditional Marvel picture. That's how the agents worked it out. And because it goes to streaming, boom, she just gets her payday, which is a huge payday, and even more than you are earning yourself this afternoon, JL. And yet, compared to a box office bonus, nothing. And that's the way negotiations are. It's all about the streaming. Box office bonus is done as an add-on, as if you were talking about the size of the Winnebago.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally different picture, so to speak. Matt, can we hear you now? Nope. Yeah, lost you. So just go ahead and restart, Matt, and we'll bring you right back in.
And if we could have Matt on sign language, if he can just do it like that and say exactly how he feels about it.
There you go. There could be one particular sign that maybe frustrated producers may be using. Oh, that's universal, right?
Oh, no.
He's number one.
We don't have that. We don't have that on this side of the pond, JL.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well, the good thing is, yeah, we're on the internet, so we can get with a lot of things that normally the FCC would chime in on, but we're all in the clear now because of the interwebs. And so, speaking of the interwebs and streaming and kind of where all of this is going again, Francois, and I know the importance of the festivals and getting everything going, but, how are these new major players that Paul alluded to, the Apples and Amazons and Netflixes of the world, changing how films are marketed, distributed, and put out into the world?
On the film side, I haven't necessarily been too impressed with how they're marketing films. I'm not against them. I think they've added a great thing to the business, but their Netflix and Amazon and some of these other companies are a little bit more in the tonnage game, where they acquire so many films and they beat out Sony people at festivals, or if you just make a mid-range budget movie, and it goes on their service, and not a lot of individual marketing care is done for each movie. It's really based on the wheel or that sort of like intro box that when you sign in, and it gives you the types of movies that you should be watching based on your previous viewing history. So that allows them to not necessarily spend a lot of money spend a lot of time on each individual movie, but they just have these constant. So my take is, I feel that it sometimes movies can get buried on these services where they're not seen as much as when you release it into a theater. There's a New York Times review and an LA Times review, or Sun Sentinel review, where it creates a little bit more of an awareness once it's in a theater versus once it premieres on a service. But again, but I also feel that these do give great opportunities to independent filmmakers to potentially get their money back, have the movie seen on a platform, maybe not as widely as if it would get an independent theater release or a wide release, but it can lead to them making the next one, and maybe the next one becomes that. So I do think that extra chance for a filmmaker to sell, and sometimes you don't even need an agent to do it. There's people like myself, independent salespeople who have the connections, who will take some films and just sell it directly. I think that's not. It has provided an opportunity for more movies to get out there and more filmmakers to get paid for what they've done. I love seeing Roku getting into the original programming business. I think that they're going to be a player in terms of buying more films, buying more TV shows. And we mentioned Ted Lasso before. I think when Apple first started, everyone questioned their strategy and what they were doing. But nothing can change those questions like a show like Ted Lasso, and now they're the hot one on the block. So, but I appreciate that their strategy is a little bit more curated, where they're not throwing up 300 things all at once, where they're maybe just taking a couple movies, a couple TV shows, focusing on those, getting the word out on those, and then seeing how they do, then moving on to the next one that's a little bit more like almost like a traditional theatrical release schedule, as opposed to really just an all-you-can-eat buffet, which, obviously it's working for some of these companies because their stock prices are so good, but it's hard to tell because no numbers are ever released, how well these projects do, and who's watching them, and did they may have outbid, say, a Vertical at a film festival, but did they pay? What's their cost to benefit ratio, in terms of viewership? So no one ever knows that, as opposed to in the old theatrical days, every Monday you had your report card, or actually sometimes even every Friday night or Sunday morning, you'd have your report card of how the movie did at the box office. The whole industry could see it, and the whole industry will grade you, and you'll grade yourself on that. So they're playing at a different level, I think it's been additive to the business, but I think it's taken away as well.
Right. Matt, I want you to jump in. Oh, yeah, we have audio on Matt.
Oh, this is good. Okay, great.
Oh, yeah.
What I was going to say is before, and I apologize for the technical difficulties, but the barrier to entry for producers is still has a lot of the same challenges, and it has new challenges as well. And one of the things that I was going to say, like my colleagues were talking about different types of distribution and different avenues for distribution and different avenues of marketing, there are certain things, like Francois was talking about, the festivals, that are sort of tried and true. And for producers, one of the things that's tried and true is having a great package. So a great script, great actor, great director, great talent, great producers, whatever that package is. So in order to form that package, there are now alternate ways of financing development. And usually in traditional ways, it's networks or studios or streamers that are financing writers and paying for development. But like we were doing at Live Nation, and now actually some record companies are doing, like the Warner Music Group, is that they're actually financing development of film and television. So all of a sudden, for us producers, especially independent producers, it gives us dollars to actually go out and get great writers to write screenplays, treatments, story bibles, pilots, and then you can help package that project with big companies, but those companies then have to work with you to create that package, and they still have to go sell them to Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Universal, Sony, you name your place. But at least that barrier to entry, you help get over the hump, because you have a different company actually paying and financing your writers, and you can get higher caliber people as a result. So the moral of that is, just as there's different ways to distribute and to market, there's different ways to finance development as well, which is sort of the first step in this entire process.
Right. Yeah, those development dollars are hard to come by, but they're so crucial, right? Absolutely.
I'm really nervous because Francois' boss has turned up and he's asking.
Future actor.
There you go. I like that he's just kind of monitoring the situation from behind the scenes. Like, better do a good job.
I think it's a little more demanding than that. There ain't no monitoring of any situation. There's some urgent action required, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love it. But you know what? It's one thing that, another secret of the marketing game is kids can get attention, right? And it's just something about doing the unexpected and having so much fun with it that is what creates our little fun breakouts in our industry as well. So
it wouldn't be a pandemic communication without some kids in the frame and some audio problems.
Absolutely, yes.
Just like MSNBC.
Also take that opportunity just to say that, it's very important about this new reality that we're in, is that Yes, those numbers are, I'm sure, great. We know the stock prices are good and so forth, but reality will settle in because we can't all afford, even on JL's salary, to have all the services all the time.
Right.
And so there's going to be churn. And what is going to be very important, and what I would say to our audience is, it's the younger audience. It's Francois' boss that really calls the shots here, because what people like Francois can't afford to do is that if his show isn't available because Francois has decided to cut that service, he will know about it and know about it very quickly. And so that's why that you get a company like E1, the biggest company in Canada, is owned by Hasbro for one thing, and that's Peppa Pig, and that's what's driving it. And it's the demand for kid entertainment by the streamers, they over-index far more than any other show. And so where Matt is, and providing for the younger audience, the music lovers and so forth, that's going to be a very big thing. So I'm working with colleagues in Miami about The Last Poets, and they were the guys that invented rap. They influenced Gil Scott-Heron and so forth. There's a big heritage thing there, but even more dynamic is going to be stuff that features the artists today that are driving streaming of music and getting them to go on to the big screen, as it were. Which is why in our introduction, we were talking about Cinderella. You can see so much what Sony wanted to do with that, to get a big artist of theirs to do a big brand like Cinderella and knock it home in the cinema. And instead, it'll be forgotten in a couple of weeks' time. It's gone to streaming, no theatrical, no red carpet, and it misses that. And finally, on that note, I'm still grieving for the loss of Jim Giannopoulos from Paramount, because there was a guy who turned Paramount round. He's the single greatest movie executive that has ever lived, and who was Tom Cruise's best buddy, was watching Mission Impossible 7, Mission Impossible 8, Top Gun, and yet it's all about Paramount Plus now. And what they missed out is, without the big theatrical release, it's just other movies.
Yeah, no, you're right. It totally just kind of has changed the game, and in terms of what is the essential thing now, right? Like you said, now with all the major studios kind of bankrolling their own streaming platforms, and the nature of the beast changing, and what that means to the consumer, because now, these studios are basically retailers in a sense, right? Because they're marketing directly to their audience. And as you said, particularly younger audiences that are so fickle, and they control the telly. And I know from kids, at 2-3 years old, they're already the ones choosing what streamer to click on. But as the parent or the grown-up in the room, you're looking at your bill at the end of the month and saying, man, I'm paying $12 for HBO Max and $8 for, Disney Plus and $15 for Netflix. And it's the new cable bundle, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. At the same time, going back to, the hustle of producers, there is now, as much as we talked about barriers to entry, both for film and television and the crossover music space and everything in between, there are now many more opportunities because of the rise of the streamers to find an audience. And just as all of the streamers are needing to find an audience and needing to find their Ted Lassos and their Game of Thrones, and their Sopranos, or whatever the iconic shows were that made certain networks, it's exciting for us producers because we're looking to try to provide them. And there's a lot more out there for us to sell our wares to.
And just quick on wanted to touch on a point that you guys were making too. Paul can maybe attest this or say I'm wrong, but it seems like the race for a lot of these streamers is really going to take place internationally, because in the US, a lot of consumers here are used to having HBO, Showtime, paying for a bunch of different ones, whereas historically in Europe and in a lot of other countries, they'd only really have one. So Netflix is so out in front of everyone else in regards to that I think for the other streamers to muscle in their way, and that's really how they're going to make their money, having worldwide rights to content. Is that you see Paramount Plus and Peacock joining forces, because or you see Discovery buying Warner, so now they're going to have combined services with a whole massive amount of content, so potentially the international market doesn't have to pick from 10, which we in the US are okay with doing. They might just have to pick between 3 or 4.
I couldn't agree more. And that just to give you a very real example, I just mentioned The Lost Poets. Next month, I'm going over to Amsterdam to meet with the author of the book that's based on, but also that's where there's a head office for Netflix, and there's a person there who's looking after Africa. Now, the way I look at it, the 19th century belonged to us. The British ruled the world. The 20th century belonged to America. 21st century is split between China and India. However, when I'm gone, second half of this century is going to belong to Africa. When Africa gets the internet and Netflix are already there, they've got an office and they realize that they're producing in South Africa, they're producing in the north, they're producing in Nigeria. They're looking at countries that you couldn't even point out on a map. And they realize that that's where the growth is coming, because there's 1.4 billion consumers that are not linked to the interwebs, and they're coming next. And so these companies are playing for the very long term. And that never occurred to any of the studios to think about, the revenues in Africa.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting how you're talking about these emerging markets now.
It is truly all about them right now. A lot of the streamers are approaching saturation, if not already there domestically. So it is all about subscribers in local territories, and how do you then drive those subscribers? Well, it's a combination of global Hollywood hits and local language film and television that they are going to want to join the service. And so yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And don't forget, this is also part of realpolitik. And this 3 years ago at the Miami Media and Film Market, there was a huge side conference going on with Chinese delegates who are in there. And, everybody's keen on working with the Chinese. Not so much now. Shang-Chi is not going to get released in China. And that's a #1 film for 3 weeks in Hollywood. It was absolutely made for an audience, and yet it won't play in China. And so there's and that's nothing to do with the quality of the filmmaking, but about realpolitik. And that's going to affect things. So we cannot bank on anything. And that's why it's why Adrian Wooten and myself come to Miami, because we realize that Miami is the capital of Latin America, and the Hispanic audience is growing. It has been for 20, 30 years, but Hollywood was very slow to catch on. And it's going to continue to be a very important audience for a very long time. And Miami will be a very important player in the media landscape.
Yeah, that's an interesting point for sure. And we're happy to get the attention when we can get it, obviously. But in terms of where the traditional studio systems, as you say, they're kind of very sort of behind things. Do you think that these sort of newer players, the streamers, are they a little bit more savvy to that? And are they kind of forcing the industry to move into areas that ordinarily they would either ignore or just kind of uncomfortable with, or just didn't know what to do with? Whereas the streamers see, look, there's only a limited number of subscribers we can access.
I mean, I would just jump in here for 1 second, which is to say, it's not that they weren't on it, and it's not that they weren't aware of it. I mean, I worked at Sony International, and, the guy who ran that did it at Fox beforehand, and he was on the forefront of bringing local language product to, various territories that were important to that particular studio. So that was happening, and it's still happening on a theatrical level with local language international departments at the major studios. But the streamers are now doing it with more volume, more boots on the ground locally, as Paul was talking about. And they're not only remaking IP, but as the studios were doing locally, but they're also ramping up in a huge way not only local language film, which the studios were traditionally only doing. Now it's a major push into local language television as well. And some of these local language television shows also become global hits, like Money Heist, for example, on Netflix.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Francois, go ahead.
But and just to follow up on that point, I think domestically, Netflix has done a really good job reaching out to African American creators, African American filmmakers, African American showrunners, and they've done a good job releasing that content. I don't think that anyone yet has cracked the Hispanic market domestically. I think because here in the U.S. the Hispanic Latino demographic is so nuanced, whether it's Mexicans or Cuban Americans or Puerto Ricans or Dominicans. So I think that those things have to be sorted out. An example of is In the Heights, which whether you like the movie or not, it really did not play at all to the Mexican part of the Hispanic demo. I've used this with Matt. The theater, a theater in San Antonio at the border, In the Heights is a new movie, was the 5th highest grossing movie in that theater. So basically, you could have put anything else on it; it would have done better than In the Heights in a very high saturated Mexican market. So. Whereas in Miami, in New York, the film played great, because it's a different subset of the demo. So I think that at least with, talking about Hispanics, it's going to be interesting to see who can figure that part out. But I do have to commend Netflix on their African American outreach in terms of shows and movies.
Yeah, no, you're right, and that has always been such a sort of difficult sort of demographic to sort of target, right? Is this idea of what is the Hispanic audience, what is the Latin American audience versus what is the U.S. Hispanic market, which, as you know, is very sort of segmented. Again, Miami is very much Cuban American, Puerto Rican, but now we have a lot of Venezuelans. There's a lot of Colombians. We do have a Mexican minority here, but they're actually much larger of a presence in places like Los Angeles and Phoenix and Texas, right?
And frankly, you see, and local language product, you see different genres working better in certain territories, even when the language of Spanish is exactly the same. So what may work fantastic locally in film in Mexico may not work in Spain or may not work in Colombia. So, it's sort of to not only is there that diaspora domestically, but certainly internationally as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that because we actually have a Spanish delegation that'll be speaking tomorrow out of that part of the world, and they've had some pretty big breakout hits from there internationally, and Money Heist and some of these other shows that you wouldn't think, but now they're like worldwide hits. So I think sometimes when something hits, maybe it doesn't matter the language or the culture. If it's just such a strong story, it can kind of overcome some of the regionality.
It's the most exciting aspect of the way the industry has changed in the last 10 years is that, when I was starting out, I've always loved, since I was a precocious child, foreign language films, and, never bothered me seeing subtitled movies. That's my kind of thing. However, now, because here in the UK, we had Scandi Noir, where suddenly detective films were really dark, and they were all from Scandinavia, and people were watching them in subtitles, and they were really getting ratings on television. And that's 10 years ago. Nowadays, as you say, Money Heist and so on. What happened in my own household is 4 years ago, I wanted to watch a Hindi show called Sacred Games. And I put it on the television. We'd had dinner Saturday night, and I started watching, and I went, I can't watch this. This is terrible, because it was dubbed. And we realized that just by altering the controls on Netflix, we could watch that in the original Hindi with Polish subtitles if we wanted to, because that's the way they can do it.
Yeah.
And so because I was able to watch it in Hindi with English subtitles, suddenly the show was transformed, and I was right into it, and it was a great show. And that's the technology. And what we also don't appreciate is just how quick it is. Because as we all know on this call, everyone in Hollywood, a film hits at the weekend, and the next week everyone's pitching that movie. Well, in streaming world, people are looking at the analytics. They're looking at the numbers that none of us get sight of, but internally they're reviewing these things and placing things. So that's why you'll see this huge investment by Netflix 2 years ago in Spain, and they're going to be churning this stuff out. And you, again, I'll repeat it, you are perfectly placed. And Camacol is a great organization for reaching out to Latin America. And I am looking with my partners about building a studio in Montevideo, because Uruguay is the Switzerland of Latin America. Who wants to open a studio in Brazil? Forget it. Uruguay, no problem.
Right.
That's fine. They operate on the US dollar. It's that one. It makes sense, and we can look at that.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to be back in Miami and to actually not only attend MMFM, but also to go and see the people who are attending Camacol, because those guys, they really move some money around.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, there's always something going on. But yeah, I think what we're sort of talking about here is a sort of a convergence of things, right? Whether it's, distribution strategies changing, what producers are thinking of in terms of packaging their projects. And we talked in this panel not only about film and TV, but, nowadays when you get a piece of IP, and this is more of a producer question now, you don't know necessarily if this is a feature or if it's a limited series. And so how do you kind of manage that, knowing that there are so many outlets, and maybe this great story, this great script could be a series and necessarily doesn't have to be a feature?
I was literally just having this conversation with a writer yesterday who wrote a really, really cool script, right? About 110 pages, needed some work. I was going through some notes, and it's a very interesting topic. And I said, have you ever given some thought to, instead of making this into a movie, making it into a limited event series where it's 7 to 9 to 10 episodes, and you can take a much deeper dive into character and story that way? And he was like, you know what? You're right. This shouldn't be a feature. I cannot get into the characters the way I need to in a movie. And so he's actually, like, based on some notes that I have given and will continue to give, he's going to retool that script into a pilot and story Bible for either a limited event series or a multi-season TV show. And this is sort of the
15
fun
years ago,
and challenge of being a producer.
15 years ago, Heath Ledger was going to direct his first movie, and that was The Queen's Gambit, and they couldn't make the numbers work. And so it got turned into a 7-hour show. Now, personally, I thought it went on and on and on, and that would have been better as a 3-hour movie, or 3 times 1 hour. But, who am I to say? The numbers prove me wrong. But it's certainly, trying to hustle and get the numbers together in the independent film world for a movie about a chess prodigy with a drink and drug problem. Not easy.
It absolutely is not. And so, this has been a really awesome session so far. And I know that, we do have a few questions coming in. So I definitely want to save a little bit of time for our Q&A as well. So I think that what we can do now is that we can just kind of maybe field a couple of questions here from our live audience and just kind of see what they have to say about all this, right? And so if you give me a second here, let me just go to the chat screen here, see if we can find a couple of questions. All right, so this is from John. My question to the panel is, how do you feel about film NFTs? Those are non-fungible tokens, and what the future of film distribution is through this particular avenue. Are you guys familiar with the NFT world?
Yeah, and I would just say if anybody wants to send via PayPal $10,000, they can take a screen grab of my image standing in front of my bookcase right now. It's a one-off offer.
Let's see if anyone takes you up on it.
Yeah, I'd say that was a bargain.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how big a part NFTs are going to play in this. I still think that electronic currencies like Bitcoin and the tracking. I would say that Francois is much more of an expert about this, because tracking how revenues are going from the theatre to home services to the producer using those mechanisms is a very pertinent point.
Yeah, it is. Francois, you have any thoughts on sort of, how this new technology across the board is kind of driving things in terms of dollars even?
Yeah, it's interesting. The company that I was consulting for previously, Forest Road, has jumped into this business big time, and they're in the process of creating partnerships with talent agencies to work directly with talent and filmmakers. I'm not too involved with it, but I would say that it gives the artist more control. It gives the artist more of an opportunity to monetize outside of any system, and I think that when that happens, it's always a good thing. My concern is what kind of bubble develops, and for people on the back end who are actually buying this stuff. Same as a little bit with the Bitcoins of the world and stuff like that. But I do think that initially, happy to see these plans going for the filmmakers and artists out there.
Right. No, absolutely.
And Paul, when I was off screen there, I was just sending you my Bitcoin purchase for that picture, so it should be across the transom shortly.
It's money well invested.
Thank you.
So I guess it's already going viral, Paul. You're going viral. You're going to be a meme soon. Okay, so we have another question here. Alfredo asked, does the update on China mean that we have reached a point that it is already closed as a market to Hollywood? So that's the question.
Absolutely not. I can assure you, just look at the hit that is Free Guy. #1 in China for 3 weeks. Great film, great, huge entertainment, and very, very pertinent because the government is cracking down on teenagers playing video games, and so it's something that is going to be very hard, even for an authoritarian government in China to take control of there. But what is happening is only this week, it's been made very clear to us that any attempts to do British, American, Australian co-productions with China, forget about it. It's just not happening at the moment because China only wants Chinese authors, Chinese stars, Chinese language. They don't want even our scripts. It's all got to be, you've got to be 100% Chinese. And I'd go even further than that. I'll bet you've got to be 100% Han, which is 92% of the population. But they're not looking for work from Taiwan. They're not looking for work from Hong Kong. They're not looking for work even from Tibet. They're looking for mainstream mainland China. And I think by all means keep working on it, but don't expect to get anywhere for at least a year.
Right.
And I would say, I think that all of that's right. I would say two additional things to that. If you consistently look at territories around the world and domestic homegrown movies, the single biggest domestic box office grosses for homegrown movies continue to come from China. I mean, just from one territory alone, you could see movies grossing $700 million, and that's just from one territory. So there's that. And then also, to Paul's point, You look at Free Guy, that's a great example, and all eyes will be on the new 007 movie, which has finally landed a Chinese release date, and traditionally those films do quite well there, and so I believe that they'll be counting on that movie doing a decent number in that territory, but of course, there's a lot going on in the world, so we'll see what happens there, and I think all eyes will be on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so I'm going to field this question from Kevin. Can you expand on Africa and the forecast for the future there? Anyone you want to touch on the African continent?
We are working with colleagues in Mauritius, and Mauritius is the gateway to Africa. It's the pearl of the Indian Ocean. It's a very small island off the coast of Madagascar, and it's very well positioned due south of the Gulf. Very good links to South Africa, very big Indian population, and indeed Chinese. So it's got a great tax credit and so forth, and it works very well in tandem with South Africa. And South Africa is going to become a huge hub. So we're looking at studios down there. And it's a question of when Africa gets the internet. It's a huge technical issue that is going to need minds greater than mine about how you get the internet to villages. But just look at what happened in India 5 years ago, where you had villages where people would gather around a television set in order to watch entertainment. And now every single man is walking around with a mobile phone. And that a cell phone in India, you can buy for $100 and it's 4G. And so just imagine how that has transformed society. Well, the same thing is coming to Africa, but just think that, the size of Africa compared to the size of India, which is tiny.
No, I think all of that's right, and between India and the continent of Africa, as there's a rising middle class, there's also a rise in the ability to get these affordable phones, and there's going to be more reason for people to want to go online, and more reason for companies to wire up to go online. So this is all happening in real time right now.
Yeah.
And also, it is 53 separate countries, Africa. So there's an enormous amount of diversity. In India, there's 26 languages, but Hindi is very, very dominant. And so what you'll see in Africa is you'll see the rise of South Africa, but you'll see countries like Nigeria, which has long had a VHS-based industry that has moved and is now taking off. But it's a free for all out there. It's for braver younger people than me to go in and try and make a stand there. But North Africa, Morocco it hosts the oldest film studio in the world. The largest film studio in the world. Atlas is very big there, and a number of very big films from Star Wars to Monty Python's Life of Brian have filmed there. And you've got Egypt, you've got Rwanda, you've got so many really interesting countries. And I think it'll be fascinating. And it's going to come in stream over the next 50, 60, 70 years. So boy, oh boy, are we talking about a long game here.
Yeah, and the question, and like everything also, is a question of economics too, right? So you say, well, what can my potential revenues be? And so I have to then prepare my budgets accordingly as well. The margins probably aren't quite amazing yet. So you sort of have to figure out, okay, for what territory is this within the continent of Africa? Can it play beyond that territory? And then can it play beyond the continent as well? So these are all sort of questions to ask going in.
Yeah. No, and I think you referenced something, and I think maybe we'll just end it on this last couple points. But, we talk about Africa, India, and then before we reference Latin America, which also have their own sort of local industries, right? Whether it's Bollywood or Nollywood or some of these great telenovelas that we see, some of which are pretty epic, that are specifically catered towards the Latin American market. How could that play into things? And will there be things eventually that kind of, once this internet access is dealt with, that can sort of cross over into the mainstream, so to speak? I think that's the big question, and I'm getting a little bit of interference on my side now. But yeah, I think that we've covered a lot in terms of the breadth of what this world of marketing and distribution means nowadays and how open it is. And I think we have time for one more question from Martin, and then we'll go ahead and sign off. So his question is: there's been a lot of discussing of having hubs in South America, Asia, and Africa. Are we moving towards a more global and decentralized industry? So you no longer have to live and work in New York or Los Angeles, or I guess maybe Miami or London. How decentralized does the industry feel in general for those who are creating content, whether features, episodics, etc.?
Well, when I started in the business, 80% of revenues were generated by America. And now it's the other way around. So the old 80-20 rule has spun round. So America counts for 20% of the box office and 80% comes for international. And numbers don't lie. So what is interesting is that, if you want a career as a scriptwriter, yes, by all means, go to Hollywood. But you can operate from Miami. You can work in a virtual world and have real impact. And what is going to be so exciting, and it's the reason I'm in this business, is if we all listened to each other's stories, if we see films from Mongolia and learn about their culture, we're far less likely to be at war with each other. And we live in such dangerous and horrific times that I just hope we can see each other's cultures, and that we are continuing to disseminate entertainment throughout the world.
Yeah, no, great point. The cultural aspect of bringing the world together is very important, as Paul mentioned. One more question before we sign off from Rita. What is the future of storytelling in VR? We've talked a lot about film and television and episodic. So, obviously we already created our very popular Paul Brett NFT, but what if we saw Paul in full VR? What would that experience be like?
Awesome.
Whoa, baby.
I don't know.
I would like to see. I'd like to see your boss, Francois, on screen in full VR. I think you're getting full VR treatment there.
That's my former boss, and Paul, he's unavailable right now.
He's
Right.
he's taking a meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question, and the VR thing has continued to come up for a number of years now. I actually, previously sort of worked very broad strokes on a group on this when I was at a former studio. I think everyone's still trying to figure out how to properly tell stories in that space, monetize it properly, the aesthetics of it. I think there's still a lot of issues. I think what you'll probably see is Apple make the jump into AR, very quickly, and then that will sort of be telling. And other companies obviously have been in the VR space, like Facebook and others, for a little while. I can't necessarily point to any huge success stories. I mean, there are, but I don't know if they've gone into the zeitgeist quite yet. But I would say I think it's a little difficult, and also it all comes down to just great scripts and great storytelling and great filmmakers, and maybe in short form, like Inarritu did a immigrant experience in VR world as well, and that was sort of a short form telling of a story that was absolutely tremendous. So when you have the right storytellers and the right filmmakers at the right budget and right length, there might be a great experience in this, but I think it will take some real innovators to make it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So we've actually run out of time here, but I want to thank my panelists. I hope to see you all again very soon, whether it be virtual reality or in real life, as the kids say, IRL, very soon as well. But thank you all for joining us today for this great panel.
Many thanks indeed.
Thank you, JL.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Paul.
Good being
Thank you,
on with you
Francois.
guys. Good
Hi,
being
Absolutely.
To the MMFFers.
And to everyone, please stay tuned because in 15 minutes, we are having our next panel on diversity. We have Gloria Fan from 20th Television. We have my friend Boone Salim from Day Zero, Trevor Noah's production company, major Bollywood producer. We just talked a lot about Indian Bollywood. Prashant Shah is going to be on that panel, as well as a local filmmaker talking about a new diversity and disability program with the Slam Dance Film Festival called Unstoppable. So in 15 minutes, we're going to be right back with another great panel. But thanks again to Paul, to Matt, and to Francois. You guys did awesome. We hope to see you around the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
See you in a few.